when it comes to thrillers, it's really hard to decipher whether something is real or whether it's all a fever dream. And this book, Dearest, by Jackie Walters, is no exception. The ending is very convoluted, and it's hard to tell what's real and what's not. So let's dive in together, and we can decipher it to find out what actually happened to Flora. Roll the intro. Hello friends, and welcome back to my channel, or welcome if you're new here. My name is Elise, and this is my mystical, spooky bookshelf. And today, as I said in my intro, my little blurb before I start talking too much, I'm going to be talking about Dearest by Jackie Walters. And this book is very intriguing, to say the least. I found it at McKay's, and I had been wanting to read this for a while, so I figured it was only $13, why not? And it was a book of the month, which I thought was interesting. I like how the book of the month covers look, like a little emblem right there. And it says it was for 2024 of October, so that was kind of cool. I should really get on book of the month, honestly, because I always hear good things about it, but I digress. This book is, classified as a psychological thriller, and it's definitely delves into the fine line of reality versus disillusionment. And a lot of the book reviews that I have seen on Goodreads, particularly, the ending is what kind of trips people up a lot, which I myself can understand, because about halfway through the book, I guess, about halfway, I would say, there's kind of a bombshell that's dropped on the reader, and it's the fact that, and this is a big spoiler, this was like a plot twist that I had not seen coming, so this is about the 2-minute mark of my video. So if you don't want to know any spoilers for Dearest by Jackie Walters, I suggest you skip my video and you go find a copy of it yourself. Or it's actually on Libby right now too. So you can probably find it on Libby pretty quickly. I will say though, I tried listening to it and it's read to you by Jackie Walters. And I'm not trying to be mean, but she's not a very good narrator. So if you actually want to just read it, I would suggest reading it. And pardon if I look distracted. I have one of my 4 dogs in here. His name's Wolfie. And he's a good boy. So if you see me kind of looking at off camera at something, it's probably him. I'm probably looking at him. So anyway, now I'm going to get into the big spoilers of this book because it's a wild ride. So before I get into the spoilers though, I should probably explain what this book is about first of all. This book is following Flora, and she is a brand new mom who just had a baby girl named Iris, and her husband is deployed at the moment. So she's kind of fighting the good fight by herself, and I feel bad for her immensely, actually. And she's kind of going crazy, actually. And it's very interesting to see that descent into madness, basically, because Flora's by herself most of the time. Her dad is in the picture. He's very loving and caring, actually, and he and his wife, her stepmom, come and help her for a little while, but then they leave, and Flora is kind of going into her own head more that I think is healthy for someone who is a new mom and has a lot of fluctuating hormones and is alone. And it's very scary, actually. It was scary for me reading this. And but in the stranger turn of events, her mom shows up, and it's very weird because what Flora tells the reader about her mom is not good things. Her mom is crazy. I'm pretty sure her mom is a narcissist in the classical sense and has a narcissistic personality disorder. So it's interesting that Flora asks her mom subliminally for help. Flora emails her mom, essentially, and her mom just shows up. And looking back on it, as I'm talking about this, I understand now. That's very weird. And I was like, totally just went with it. I didn't think anything of it. But then the bombshell of all bombshells are dropped on the reader. And I'm trying to remember what page that bombshell was dropped on. I have the book in front of me. This book is told in 3 or 4 parts. And each part is kind of like more and more, you're getting more descent into madness. Flora's getting more and more detached from reality the farther that you get into this book. And it's so interesting. And I think another interesting part of this book, before we get into major spoiler territory, is the fact that Flora has an imaginary friend too. And she hasn't had her imaginary friend pop up for about, Flora's what, 32? Probably for about 12 years. She didn't have her imaginary friend pop up. Hey, Wolfie. I'm sorry. I'm trying to make sure he doesn't get into anything. But yeah, so she has this imaginary friend, and she hasn't seen her in like 12 years because Flora is supposedly a grounded adult, and grounded adults don't have imaginary friends. But her imaginary friend pops up once she gets notice of her mother coming. Once she has this, like, thought process of wanting to contact her mom through email. And I keep wanting to say her best friend, but I guess it kind of is her best friend. Her imaginary friend's name is Zephyr, but she goes by Zeffy, and it's this little girl, and I'm pretty sure she's pictured on the front of the cover, and she's kind of creepy looking, I'm not gonna lie. I thought maybe she would be a demon, but I was sorely mistaken on that front. There was demonic presences in this book that were not Zeffy. But Zeffy is basically a little girl, and she looks exactly like Flora, which is also something that, as the reader, I should have, kind of been skeptical towards, because it's weird to have an imaginary friend that looks just like you, and it's very interesting that she would conjure up a version of herself as her imaginary friend. So that's another thing where it's like this spoiler after the fact is like, it really makes a lot of sense, and I really should have questioned it sooner, but I didn't. So the big spoiler is basically once Flora's mom shows up, things kind of go crazy, like super duper Alice in Wonderland, but like make it gory and make it really weird. And it took me for a loop. And the biggest spoiler that I can give you is that her mom is dead. Flora's mom is dead. So the fact that Flora's mom is here and came to visit Flora, I'm just like, what? I read that and I was like, my mind was blown. I had to put the book down for a minute. And I was like, oh my gosh, her mom's not real. Her mom's dead. I mean, her mom was real, but she's dead. And I'm just like, that's interesting. So is Flora hallucinating everything? And it's even more sad because her mom's not just like dead, but her mom unalived herself. And that's even more sad to me, in my opinion. And it makes it even more traumatic because it feels like Flora, like, repressed it from her memory, and she didn't remember that her mom had passed away. So that was so interesting to read. And I was like, okay, that's that. Yeah, so that was part 1. And part 2, part 2 is, okay, part 1 is her mom shows up. Part 2 is when the insanity kind of happens. And Flora and her mom have a very weird relationship. They're kind of estranged. They were estranged, I guess. So Flora's kind of confused when her mom first shows up. And it's like, I'm confused too. I didn't think her mom would even respond to the email. And then she just shows up out of the blue. So that's when things kind of get weird, is part 2, when Jody shows up. And Jody is kind of like saying some crazy things. And she's not really acting like herself. And that's kind of where I kind of got, like, my ears perked up, in a sense. Like, I could tell something was wrong when her mother showed up, but I couldn't put my finger on it. And when I had read that her mom had unalived herself 2 years ago, and, like, this hallucination came to visit Flora, I was like, okay, is Jody a demon, a ghost, a spirit of some sort that's not able to be let go of this plane? Or is it something darker, where she's a demonic presence that is taking the form of Flora's mom, which I think could totally be plausible because Flora's mom acts really weird. And she has this really strange eye twitch in her right eye, which is explained by how she unalived herself. I guess, I don't think I could probably say this on YouTube, but it's very graphic the way it's described, and it's a trigger warning for sure. Like, if you don't want to read about someone's mom doing that, don't read this, because it's not like it's super heavy, but it's not something I would recommend if you have sensitivities to that, or sensitivities to, like, mental health problems, because Flora is sort of like her mom, which is kind of terrifying to Flora, because she wants to not be like her mom, like, staunchly not be like her mom. So the eye twitch is the thing that caught me off guard too, but Jody kind of flips it off like, oh, it's just part of getting old. Because Flora's mom is like, or she was, I think she was almost 60. So she kind of puts it off as like a weird elderly thing that's going on with her. And another thing that Jody is doing as Flora's hallucination gets worse, she's constantly trying to take Flora's baby away from her. And she goes so far as to almost drown Flora and Iris, I think. But the fact that her mom isn't really real, is she's more of a hallucination or a spiritual disturbance of sorts, it makes the reader wonder, is Flora the one doing this, like thinking of her mom, or did this actually happen? And I don't think any of this actually happened. I mean, I know it didn't happen, but I think Flora is just at such a fragile psychological point in her postpartum that any slight disturbance can throw her off kilter. And it's really scary watching, like, as the reader watching Flora go through this. And the one thing I thought was interesting is that Flora's mom has the story, the yellow wallpaper, with her. And if anyone is familiar with that story, you will know it is about a woman that goes crazy and thinks that she can escape through the wallpaper, essentially. And I read that in high school, and I thought it was an interesting callback, because that story was also really weird and unsettling to read. So it was interesting that Jackie kind of put that little Easter egg in there, that this story is sort of like the yellow wallpaper. There's a woman descending into madness slowly, and it's both Jody and Flora being in the madness, not just Flora. And it's interesting because her husband is not present when her mom is here. her husband is still deployed, and he's gone for or he comes back in 2 weeks. So this takes place in the span of 2 weeks in the winter time, or close to the winter time. I think it takes place in January maybe. But so it's interesting. And another plot twist that is also interesting is Zeffie. So there's some very big family secrets that Flora does not know, and that her mom had not divulged to her. And one of them being that Flora had a twin sister named Zephyr, whose nickname was Zeffie. And her mom had essentially unalived that baby in a maniacal stupor, which is very similar to what she was doing to Iris when that part of the hallucination had taken place. So Jody had unalived Zeffie and was unable to do the same to Flora because her dad came in time and saved her. So the fact that Flora's imaginary friend is actually her twin sister is really interesting, and there's a lot of psychological boxes to unpack with that. Flora had never actually met Zeffie because they were 6 weeks old when Zeffie had passed away. So the fact that Flora was so connected to Zeffie that she actually internalized parts of her and made her a real person, essentially, is so mind-blowing to me. And it's really sad because I think Flora and Zeffie would have a beautiful relationship if it wasn't for her mom being a total crazy bat. A crazy bat, basically. And I don't know, this book was such a trip for me. I was like, okay, first, the mom is not actually alive. And second, the imaginary friend is actually the dead twin sister. That is so interesting. And Flora's husband comes back in part 3, I think. And he is not understanding what Flora is going through whatsoever. He's kind of portrayed as this, he seems like he's standoffish, but Flora describes him as being warm and comforting, but he presents himself to the reader in a way that is not comforting or warm whatsoever, and he kind of thinks Flora's crazy. So I don't understand why Flora loves him so much, because he doesn't present himself very well to the reader. But it could also be because he's under the stress of this situation, and he's written as someone who just came back from being in the army. So obviously he might have some PTSD. I'm not really sure. There's not a whole lot about Connor, just what Flora tells the reader and what the reader can deduce by reading parts where Connor is present. So that's just my opinion on him. He's kind of standoffish. He might have PTSD, but I'm not sure. And she tries to explain everything to Connor, but it's just not working. And I mean, I can understand. I wouldn't believe her either. It's crazy. I mean, I understand that women going through pregnancy afterwards, they get some really, really messed up thoughts in their brain. They want to hurt their baby. I know that's a common thing with mothers afterwards. They get postpartum depression. They don't want to be around their baby anymore. They're afraid they're going to hurt their baby, basically. And that's pretty much what Flora and Jody had gone through. Jody had that same thing where she did actually hurt her baby. But Flora didn't actually hurt her baby. I think her mom's spirit was the one hurting her baby. But the thing that I was mentioning in my first little 25-second synopsis before I started talking is that the ending is very convoluted. There's this thing that that Flora's mom had. It was a birth tusk. It was it felt like voodoo magic almost. And I think that's the thing. That was the evil spirit that ended up possessing Jody, and that ended up manifesting as Jody, was that evil demonic spirit that was attached to the birth tusk. Because it's about this deity that's sort of tied to fertility and wisdom and keeping the baby safe, but I don't think it actually keeps the baby safe. And I think it's that demonic entity that ends up entering Jody, and that makes Jody unalive herself, probably. Because behind everything like that is a demonic entity, let me tell you. There's definitely, almost all of the time, if you hear about someone doing something like that, it's tied to a demonic presence. And it's not a coincidence that it's in this book too. So they kind of have to do a cleansing at the end, and then Flora gets possessed by Jody, who's possessed by this demon, and Flora ends up setting herself on fire in order to purge this deity from Jody and from herself. And I can see why people are confused, because Flora miraculously lives, and I'm not saying that can't happen, because I'm pretty sure it can. I mean, miracles happen all the time. I'm a firm believer in God. I believe in miracles. But I think in terms of this story, I don't think Flora actually lived. I think she's in this weird sort of realm, maybe like a purgatory almost. But because in the end, in the epilogue, after she wakes up from her coma, she gets a prosthetic leg. And I'm really shocked that's the only damaging part that happened, was that she had to get a prosthetic leg. I'm sure if she burned her entire body, she would have far more injuries than just getting her leg cut off. So I don't think Flora actually ever woke up from her coma. I think she ended up passing away. And I think, because there's an epilogue too, where she meets Zephy, and she helps Zephy let go into rest, like having rest. And then it goes into the epilogue after that. So the ending is Zephy and Flora go into this place that Zephy conjured up, and she helps Zephy be let go and to be rest in peace. Kind of like at the end of the Haunted Mansion, where the spirits are released into the night and they're finally at peace. So Flora helps Zephy do that. But Flora, I don't ever see Flora wake up after that. Like it says she did in the epilogue, but I don't think it actually happened. I think Flora was in a coma for the rest of her life, and that what happens in the epilogue isn't actually real. It's something that Flora's mind conjured up until, like, to live in as a safe space until she actually passes away from the coma. Because it starts off as saying it's Iris's 3rd birthday, and that Flora's pregnant, she has a prosthetic leg, she remembers everything that happened with her mom, and she's like trying to let go of what actually happened, and she's trying to let go of the fact that Jody possessed her through this demonic presence that was attached to the birth tusk. And the one thing that makes me think that none of this is real is the very, very last line, because when Flora was possessed by Jody, who was possessed by the birth tusk spirit, she had the eye twitch. Flora had the same eye twitch her mother had. And the very last line is, she's eating a cupcake, so I'm going to read it. And this time, when the frosting squeezes between her teeth, the shock of the sugar makes her right eye twitch. And that's the very last line of the book. So it makes me think that this epilogue is just a safe space that Flora's mind created to keep Flora sane during her coma, and she's not actually alive. She's not actually awake. I think she ends up passing away from all of this that happened, and that maybe she never got freed from her mom, and she never got freed from that possession because she has the same eye twitch still. And I just think that's really interesting. And I mean, it could be not true. Everything could be true in the epilogue. It could just be real life. But that's how I interpret it. I don't think the ending actually is real. I think it's something that Flora's mind conjured up. And if you read it and you have a different conclusion, I would love to know your thoughts on it, because I don't think the ending's real. And I don't think I saw anybody have that take on Goodreads. I think I just saw that they were confused by it. But I think if we go off on all of the Easter eggs that are present in this book, like it's about the yellow wallpaper, there's obviously a demonic entity, and we know that Flora is already in a fragile state of mind. So I think putting all those pieces together, you can come to the conclusion that maybe none of it happened. Like maybe Flora doesn't get a happy ending. She's actually not alive anymore. Or she's not like physically present. But her mind is alive in her coma until she passes away. And from a natural death, obviously. But yeah, that's my thoughts on it. I gave this book 3.5 stars. It was almost a 4-star. But I think I can justify it being a 4-star since I'm explaining the ending, how I interpreted it. But it's definitely a crazy book. And I'm sorry, Wolfie, he's doing something. I don't know what he's doing. But yeah, so those are my thoughts on it. I hope you enjoyed this video. I'm sorry it's a little more chaotic than normal. I'm trying to try a new thing because Wolfie doesn't like to be away from me. He's very much a mama's boy. But anyway, so thank you for watching. Thank you for subscribing and your comments. And I will see you in the next video. Goodbye, friends.